I was reading somewhere that 1 in 10 Indians will have cancer at some point in their life. Now imagine 150 million Indians living today are likely to get cancer. How many therapists or how many oncologists do you have? You have 800 or maybe 1,000 oncologists. Because of this huge demand-supply mismatch, there is a mismatch of power. What's the way to solve it? We started off investing in companies at Series A and Seed at W Health Ventures, the fund. Looked at about 2 to 2,500 companies in India.
Wow.
And a lot of exciting innovation, a lot of entrepreneurial energy. At the same time, we realized that, building in healthcare is hard. I've said that 10 times in the podcast, and I've probably said it 100 times this month. The reasons or the factors that make building in healthcare hard, right? Can we build playbooks to make it faster, better, cheaper? Can we identify areas in healthcare that need disruption, that we can build a 10x better solution for a real problem downstream? So that led to the concept of 2070 Health. And the concept there is, let's build the future of healthcare, but let's build it today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. And today on the podcast, we have a very interesting person. We have Dr. Pankaj Jethwani. He's asked me to call him Pankaj. So that's how I'll be addressing him in this podcast. He is the co-founder of 2070 Health, which is a venture studio. So they incubate ideas and specifically in healthcare. We've covered a bunch of healthcare startups before, and I am actually curious about this whole idea to product to company journey that some of these healthcare startups undertake. And it's very unique as well because it isn't like, your average SaaS startup as such. We're going to learn all of this and more in this conversation, so stay tuned. Hey Pankaj, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for making the time.
Absolutely. I think we have a dress code going on here.
Oh yeah, I just noticed. We've had a few healthcare startups and it always, strikes me as something that is like from the outside, it feels like the things that are broken are so obviously broken. Like, why can't someone just fix it, right? But then, when I get talking to a founder or an entrepreneur in healthcare, I just realized it's just way too complicated, right? The whole ecosystem is so complex and so on and so forth, right? I guess what I want to start with is, how do you begin putting the pieces together? How do you sort of align incentives in this very complicated healthcare ecosystem?
Yeah, that's the billion dollar
question.
Yeah. I think we all know healthcare is complex. What we mean by that is there are multiple stakeholders. When you're building in healthcare, you're not only building for the patient or the customer, you're also building for the doctor. You're also building for the relative of the patient. You're also building for some insurance company. You're building for a pharmaceutical company. All these different stakeholders obviously have different incentives. And that kind of makes it a little bit more hard than other industries. The other fundamental, let's simplify it. Let's take a step back and be like, okay, who are the two most important constituents in this ecosystem? It's the patient and the doctor. Now, what does the patient want? The patient wants to get better, is typically price conscious, wants it at the cheapest price possible, and then maybe also wants a decent experience, wants to be treated like a human being in that entire interaction. On the other end, what do doctors want, right? They want to treat patients. They want to create an impact for the world. They want to create a name for themselves. At the same time, they also want to make money. So now you'll say this balance exists in every industry. What is different in healthcare? That there's a huge imbalance between the demand and the supply. We have the healthcare demand, the industry is swelling up. There are more issues today than there were ever before. There are new diseases. There are, increased prevalence of these diseases, and there's a lot happening. But our supply just doesn't exist. I was reading somewhere that 1 in 3 suicides in the world happen in India. 1 in 10 Indians will have cancer at some point in their life. Now imagine 150 million Indians living today are likely to get cancer. How many therapists or how many oncologists do you have? You have 800 or maybe 1,000 oncologists.
Wow.
I
would have guessed a few thousands at least.
You have 3,000 psychiatrists, and there are probably 3,000 psychiatrists in Manhattan or New York. Because of this huge demand-supply mismatch, there is a mismatch of power. What's the way to solve it? Technology is the only way to solve it. To be the equalizer so that a doctor can see not 100 but 10,000 patients, and patient doesn't have to wait months or weeks or I think the only way to kind of bring balance to this chaos in India and this massive gap is technology. So, for example, one of our portfolio companies, Visa, has built an AI therapist, uses conversational AI and other technologies to provide therapy or to provide support to patients.
By the way, we've had Joe on the podcast.
Oh, that's
of
amazing.
Visa.
She's phenomenal. So what Visa does now serves more than 7 million patients.
Right.
A small company out of Bangalore with a few engineers and a few data scientists are serving 7 to 8 million patients globally today, hopefully hundreds of millions of people in the next few years. And people have had about 1 billion conversations on the platform. Now, we need solutions that are enabling physicians, enabling patients, not 1x, 2x, 3x, but 100x. And I think that is something that will help us align incentives more broadly. I think the other thing is that in the Western markets, who is responsible for aligning incentives is the insurance company, the person who pays. That in India is still evolving, but we also hope that with more insurance penetration down the road, we will have hopefully insurance companies paying for value, not for volume of service. So we'll pay for hospital events, not the number of days a person is staying in the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So interesting times ahead, but in our opinion, technology is the only way to kind of balance out and provide what we all aspire for a growing India. So,
right. Yeah, there is this inherent skepticism with respect to anything hospitals and doctors, right? If I were to sort of voice what my dad or mom thinks, went into the hospital, they'd probably keep them there, right? There's no incentive for the doctor or the hospital to say, okay, you're doing all right. You can perhaps recover at home. And at the same time, I mean, what is the incentive for a doctor to sort of spend time with a patient at all, right? I mean, because as you said, they also have to make money, and this kind of jinxed demand supply doesn't help at all. So when you think of the future of healthcare, right? I mean, let's say some kind of robotics, and would it be some kind of like standardized service through technology where, doctor plus AI plus robotic machine stuff, right, is able to see more patients, do better, be more efficient, so on and so forth? Is that the future of healthcare?
it's a little bit of all that. And the one thing that we forget is that healthcare at the end of the day is very trust driven. It's hard to build in healthcare because unlike, what you do in the SaaS world, you can't build fast and break things when it comes to people's health.
Yeah.
It is a regulated industry, and sometimes for the right reasons, for the same reasons that, patients' lives are at stake. I think the broader construct we believe where health is going to be is it's going to be an increased role of technology, emergence of AI to automate a bunch of things. But at the center of all of this is going to be the sacrosanct doctor-patient relationship. There will be a lot of innovation, but that relationship will remain. Or does that mean that everything will be digital and everything, we'll have, a sci-fi movie happening in real life? My answer is, I don't think so. For every 100 rupees being spent on healthcare today in India, 3 rupees or 4 rupees are spent online. 97% or 97 rupees are spent offline. That's where the trust resides. And will that number change? Maybe. So I think what we will see are newer omni-channel models where people will be building, or founders will be building, keeping the patient experience and outcomes front and center. Will leverage technology, and if you don't, there is no business to be had. And at the same time, continue to build on the sacrosanct relationship between the doctor and the patient. So again, technology, AI will definitely lead the way, but it will not keep the doctor aside.
Right. The other facet that is acutely Indian is the out-of-pocket expenses, right? Majority of healthcare expenses in India are out-of-pocket. How do you see that changing as insurance penetration increases and so on? Because we see the end game of what it's like in perhaps the US, for instance, right? But the US has like a good judicial system, at least a swift judicial system, right, where there are claims and counterclaims and so on and so forth, right? How do you see that, panning out in India over the next 10, 15 years?
Both the private and government insurance penetration is increasing with Ayushman Bharat and with just more Indians buying insurance, both on the group side as well as on the individual side. So we'll continue to see the uptake of insurance. That will that number be 90% covered by insurance completely? The answer is no. Will that happen someday? The answer is maybe, hopefully, right? Nobody knows. But I feel that the insurance ecosystem is rapidly evolving even today, maybe even compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's a good sign. That means that hospitals can make more investments in bed capacity. There's more willingness to pay. there is more access to care, and that means that also the hospital business is booming, right? It's $100 billion plus industry, maybe a $130 to $140 billion industry today. It's growing 15-18% year on year, just the hospital industry. Good part of this reason is availability of capital, as well as the increased penetration of insurance.
If I were to think about consumerization of healthcare, right? I mean, that's the other thought, right? I mean, that's, let's say, an extreme thought where I say that, hey, I don't want to see a doctor, right? I want to take control of my own health. So I will track my biomarkers or whatever it is. And there are all sorts of devices, right? You're wearing an Apple Watch. I spoke to you about an Aura ring and so on and so forth, right? Do you see those devices get to a point where, they can be like adequately relied upon?
Yeah, I think the accuracy is going up every cycle, right? So from a reliability of data standpoint, absolutely. What do you do with that data is something that a lot of startups are building on, right? Like you have these inputs and sensors, and suddenly you can now make sense of it because someone is telling you how to make sense of it. Will the quality of these devices improve? Absolutely. Will that mean that more people will start using them? I think so. That's what we've seen in India so far. That's what we've seen in the West as well. Will that mean that more people are taking charge of their own health? Directionally, yes, right? What that means for India is, will it be 500 million people? I don't think so. If you think about the large discrepancies we have in healthcare today, you walk into Tata Memorial Hospital, a group of phenomenal providers, phenomenal doctors, phenomenal institute doing, God's work. But you walk in the OPD, you'll see a sea of patients waiting hours because honestly, it is jam-packed. And so those are the challenges ahead of us, right? If we are to build a stronger nation for the future, we need to invest in education. We need to invest in the health of our people. We need to invest in food and maybe our climate. And those are the building blocks of what will then create a more productive workforce that will then, create a brighter and, better India. So I think the whole, the challenges of scale, we are dealing with millions, sometimes billions. And that magnitude itself is, it's fairly overwhelming. And I think that is the opportunity for founders. The opportunity for founders is solving really large problems that don't have a solution today, that they can solve with a 10x better solution and figure out the go-to-market, right? Those are the kind of companies that we're interested in backing.
Yeah, but, India often surprises you in terms of innovation at the cost constraints that we have here, right? I mean, whether you talk about, let's say, ISRO launching satellites and whatnot at, a few hundred crores, or whether you talk about our vaccines, right? So I'm still hopeful that, maybe someone will do that R&D on the device front to figure if it's, I don't know, if it's a ring or a band or whatever else, right? That can not just serve like upper elite classes of the country, but it could also like go far and wide to tier 2, tier 3 maybe, right? And hopefully, as an outsider to healthcare, right? I mean, I mentioned that, a lot of things seem obviously broken, right? And if you apply your typical tech founder lens to it, I mean, you will start, building a bunch of stuff, right? What are some 2 or 3 things that, outsiders often get wrong, like very naively get wrong? Like, what are those things that kind of smack people in the face once they start like getting into the problem and solving it?
So we're seeing the first wave of innovation. It kind of enables what's going ahead. The challenge with this is that founders are building sometimes a lot of the same stuff. Right. So the real question is, okay, what is my differentiation? What is my value proposition? What is my right to win? What is my moat? Right now, this is true in other industries. It continues to be true in healthcare. Healthcare is slow and resistant to change. Yeah. It's slow for outsiders. It's resistant towards outsiders. Realization of that fact, embracing that fact, and then working on that fact is something that is hard, that we see sometimes, founders miss upon.
It's a funny thing, right? I mean, just I think a month and a half back, I had taken my mom to the hospital, and I could see that the doctor was really struggling with the software he was using, entering all of the notes and everything, right? And, I asked him, so what software is this? And he said, it's something we've built in-house. And mind you, this is a large enough hospital, right? It's a chain. And I wondered why. Why isn't there like a standard software as such, right? I mean, like a SaaS software that isn't used. Yeah. And I figured that there aren't a lot. I mean, rather, a lot of these hospitals use their own in-house tech, so to speak. And you know how those are, right?
So we're seeing hundreds of EMR companies in the market,
Right.
with limited scale. We're seeing hospitals sometimes use them, sometimes build their own stuff. I think the one other mistake that I see founders make, sometimes try to circumvent doctors. Right? The real power of building a healthcare company is leveraging your one of two main stakeholders and building alongside them and with them. There's a desire to kind of do that, and we've seen companies that have embraced the power that the doctor-patient relationship bring. Those startups have more adoption, both from providers as well as from patients.
Right. So we've spoken, I think, about the healthcare landscape and what the opportunities could be. How is investing in healthcare different?
I believe now we're sitting on immense amount of opportunity, and because the healthcare industry in India is growing massively, 20-25% year on year. In 10 years, it'll be a $1 trillion industry. It'll contribute a lot to our GDP. It'll employ a large number of people, and it'll impact an even larger number of people. We believe that there will be newer models of care, right? There'll be newer specializations that don't exist today, industries that don't exist today. I'll give you an example. Chronic pain, right? Back pain, neck pain, joint pain. There are about 200 million Indians who suffer from chronic pain.
Yeah.
The current solution, I went to medical school, we weren't taught much about chronic pain management, right? The current solutions that are available is, maybe get physical therapy or get a surgery. But pain itself is biopsychosocial. It's a little bit about your joints and bones, a little bit about your brain and how it perceives pain. It's a little bit about your reality, what you're working, where you're working, what you're eating, etc. Many times, a lot of these different factors trigger pain. And just solving one of those 4 or 5 triggers is not enough. It's a white space. We don't have nationally scaled companies that have figured out how to manage chronic pain at scale. So we have 200 million Indians living with chronic pain for years. And that changes their lives, And these are the kind of opportunities that we are interested in building and backing. Our framework for evaluating companies is, are you solving for a large market? We're not interested in backing companies that are solving for a couple million patients, because just of the dynamics and realities of investing and building companies in India. The second question we ask is, are you solving a very clear patient side problem that is not being addressed today in the market? For chronic pain, it is, look, I'm living with chronic pain. I've gone to my surgeon, I've gone to my doctor, I've gone to my physical therapist, I've gone to my nutritionist. It hasn't gone away. The third thing we ask is, can you bring a 10x better solution than what exists today? Not a 2x better solution, not a 3x. Can you bring a 10x better, materially better solution to the market? And if the answer is yes, it becomes extremely compelling. So when we started, or when we helped launch a company called Nivan, which is one of India's first company managing chronic pain, data suggests that a multidisciplinary approach of managing pain, where you have not only a surgeon, but also a medical doctor, a physical therapist, a nutritionist, a counselor, all working together to manage pain and the different aspects of pain, works better. Right?
That's a more holistic solution.
Yeah. So that is the gold standard of managing pain. And so with Nivan, we've built technologies and we built clinics that look at a person as a whole. And 60% of our patients who have chronic pain for years show significant improvement less than a month. Question that we're asking is, can we build a 10x better solution than what exists today? And finally, we need to ask ourselves, and what we ask our founders is, are people willing to pay for it? Right? Or what is the right go-to-market? What is the right channel? Are you first to market? What is the moat? So these are questions that people would ask in other industries. And these questions are front and center when we're investing in healthcare as well. There are a couple more nuances here, right? I think healthcare needs some amount of patient capital. That you need. We're not talking about 3-year, 4-year, 5-year cycles. Sometimes we're talking about 8-year, 10-year, 12-year cycles. So that is a nuance in healthcare that we're aware of. And finally, all of this doesn't matter, right? If you're not building for patients front and center. If the patient and their health and their long-term happiness is not front and center of your model, that model will not scale. We've seen again and again, over and over again. Like one of my personal idols is Dr. Devi Shetty, right? He has made cardiac surgeries and now large number of surgeries and procedures available to millions of people, right? And the one thing that they've always been asking for years and for decades is, are we doing right for patients? Can we reduce costs significantly? Can we provide the best outcomes in the world at 100th or 150th the price of what a UK would or a US would? So this consumer or patient obsessiveness and keeping them front and center is what is going to drive successful companies or not. There are so many problems to be solved, right? We spoke about oncology. We spoke about, think about pediatrics. The average general pediatric clinic hasn't changed in decades. When you take your child to a general pediatrician clinic, even if it is for a vaccine, even if it is for a well baby visit, it feels like it used to in the 90s. It feels there are a bunch of pain points that need to be solved. There are multiple areas that can be transformed, leveraging technology, a modern experience, keeping the patient front and center, getting the doctors along, and then solving for scale.
But yours is a venture studio model, right? I mean, how is that kind of different? I know we were chatting a little bit before we started recording also. So you create these ventures, right, in-house, and then find the right entrepreneur, the founder to kind of take it and scale it, right? How is that different from, let's say coming in early, writing a check and so on? That is one question. And second, I realized that you guys raised 30 million quite recently as well, right? What's it like raising money in this market?
We started off investing in companies at Series A and Seed at W Health Ventures, the fund. Looked at about 2,000 to 2,500 companies in India.
Wow.
And a lot of exciting innovation, a lot of entrepreneurial energy. At the same time, we realized that, building in healthcare is hard. I've said that 10 times in the podcast, and I've probably said it 100 times this month. And at the same time, we see that the industry is growing. There are a large number of white spaces. So we asked ourselves, can we solve for the reasons or the factors that make building in healthcare hard, right? Can we build playbooks to make it faster, better, cheaper? Can we identify areas in healthcare that need disruption, that we can build a 10x better solution for a real problem downstream? So that led to the concept of 2070 Health. And the concept there is, let's build the future of healthcare, but let's build it today. So what we do is we bring together futuristic ideas, exceptional founders, and empower them with a powerful innovation platform that helps them go from an idea all the way to product market fit and early scale, faster, better, and cheaper. So what we do there is we start by spending ample amount of time in going extremely deep on ideas. We kill 90% of our ideas with conviction. We have thousands of conversations with doctors, patients. We run experiments. We kind of de-risk the idea and concept itself even before the first venture dollar has been put in. At that point, we get extraordinary bunch of founders or entrepreneurs in residence who then build the idea, the business plan along with the team. And once we feel confident that there's a business to be built here, we help build out the team. We get on board other founders, other team members, and then we support their journey through a powerful innovation platform. Now, this innovation platform has people from product, engineering, go-to-market, research, talent, finance, legal, etc., so that a bunch of the things that will not make or break the business, that are tick box exercises that founders often take maybe a year or 6 or 8 months to figure out, we have them figured out on day zero. So, for example, telesales is something that a large number of healthcare companies use to actionate sales. And it takes 6-8 months to figure out the right messaging, the right team structure, the right technology. All of this can be made available on day zero. A lot of companies will do performance marketing or digital marketing in healthcare to acquire their patients. Again, it's a 6 to 12 month journey of figuring out the messaging, the right partner, maybe agencies or the right kind of team. We kind of like fasten that whole process. A lot of companies will build software from scratch in order to see patients. They'll build doctor-facing software, they'll build patient-facing software, they'll build growth, software for growth teams, cobble together what's available in the ecosystem plus build on top. We have an internal care stack, a technology stack that every single company gets on day zero and which they can customize and build on top of. So the goal with this entire ecosystem is to solve hard problems.
So basically, you de-risk venture creation to a point where you can directly think of scale, right? I mean, rather than like figure out all of the 100
Yeah.
nuances that are attached to it.
We're getting there, hopefully. But I think the idea is better, faster, cheaper.
Right. How do you validate some of these ideas? Because I think that is important, right? In SaaS or wherever, I mean, you put up a landing page and then shoot out a bunch of emails and stalk people on social media and whatnot, and you get to the answer, right? I mean, you get to your first 100 yeses, nos, or whatever it is. How do you validate in healthcare? It seems like a very complex thing to do.
I mean, a lot of it is running similar experiments, but with your ethical guard up, right? Your patient safety lens always front and center. So we run experiments. We talk to patients. We talk to physicians. There is no validation except real revenue. Patients coming, using a service, getting better. Providers coming, appreciating the validity of your clinical service, and doing better themselves. Right, so that is reality, and what we want to do is let's bring down the time for seeing the first patient in a clinically safe manner to a couple of months, not 8 to 12 months. Let's kind of hasten this process in a way that it is still clinically safe and is built with the patient experience front and center.
Right. What's it like, raising money in this market?
We're fortunate to have investors who believe in us, mission that we're on. We've gotten a brilliant team of about 50 people who are ex-founders, clinicians, technologists, all under one roof. We've spoken to thousands of founders, and hundreds of them are actually interested and motivated to build with us. We're very lucky for that. I think the reason why it feels special, and I think the reason why we've received more interest than what we should, is because we're trying to solve something that is fairly large and fairly hard. This goes back to a story I heard a few months ago. In fact, I was talking to Dr. Devi Shetty, who I spoke to briefly, and he mentioned 70 or 80 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, there was this man who roamed around India. He was 5'5", 5'6". He was soft in the way he spoke. We didn't have any mass media. We didn't have any amplification of messaging. There was no reason why he should have been able to or could have been able to stir up an entire nation. He convinced 400 million Indians of something that they had never experienced. People then were slaves. Their fathers were slaves. Their grandfathers were slaves. Freedom was something that no one had experienced. But he coalesced, without any media, 400 million Indians on a common belief and purpose of freedom. And the power of purpose is huge. And so I think building in healthcare and unlocking some of these problems resonates with people a lot because of the same power of purpose. And so it feels good to have raised capital. But I feel that is a small start in this long journey. 0 to 1 is hard, right? But it's addictive, right?
Yeah.
Right? We're helping build now. We've launched about 4 companies in the first year.
Right.
And every day there are, things breaking.
Yeah.
And not across 1, but 4, 5, 7 companies.
Yeah.
And I think I believe it's the start of something special.
Yeah. No, I think the 0 to 1 has this very seductive nature, It draws you in, and in the initial stages, you just can't wait to get the hell away from that, out of it, right? I mean, and then you realize that you just like the chaos, you like the ambiguity, you like being wired, right? To be able to deal with fires and to deal with situations on a daily basis, right? And not just like sit around say for even a while.
Yeah, right? I read in a book that there are only 2 states of being a founder or being in a startup, that of euphoria and that of absolute terror.
Yeah.
And the lack of sleep makes it worse. So that's the constant phase, and that's the constant state. And look, the venture studio model is fairly new to India.
Right.
In regulated, highly resistant to change industries in the world, venture studios have created some lasting companies and change. We're bringing this to the India market, not for anything else, but we believe that synergies, learnings, the tools and the playbooks can make it easier to focus on what's the hardest part of that business. And that is why we believe that a venture studio approach towards venture building can be exciting in India, where, look, we'll have to roll up our sleeves, leverage the right technologies, build hard, try hard to get to where we need to.
If you were to wear your policy hat for a bit, right, and think about solving, healthcare problems in India, you could do maybe 2 or 3 things. What are those large policy measures that you would advocate?
I'm not a policymaker. I think the government is fairly supportive for change. No one is going to get, for a lot of things, the laws are grey. Right? Until recently, that was the case with telemedicine and pharmacies and all that stuff. But what we tell our founders is, obviously, where the law is grey, no one is going to put you in jail for doing right by patients. Right? No one is going to put you in jail for treating patients a little bit more courageously. I think if you have your moral guard high, if you're doing right by patients, and if you are creating a trail that will help support that, folks are extremely encouraging for innovation. In fact, that brings us to one of the areas that we're actually interested in building in, right? We believe that we have an opportunity in India to build AI companies in healthcare that we won't find in other places in the world because of the availability of data, the availability of talent that is getting better and better in AI, and then a fairly conducive regulatory environment. Feel we can build some extremely exciting companies that truly leverage the power of AI versus maybe some places in the West. What has happened over the last decade is healthcare information has gotten widely available. You Google stuff and you get stuff. You have.
I do it all the time.
But you're not getting advice that is personalized to you.
It's not curated. Yeah.
It's okay. It's not an answer to the problem that you face in a clinically safe manner. I think we have an opportunity to build systems, AI-enabled, clinically safe, that maybe, over time even FDA approved, that will enable us to have a GP or a doctor in everyone's WhatsApp, in everyone's phone. So there's a lot of exciting things that can be built out of India for the rest of the world, for the global south, to solve for access and move the needle when it comes to healthcare experience, healthcare transactions. So, we're building in areas, new age areas that have been underserved from a healthcare delivery standpoint. We're building, hopefully, a couple of AI moonshots that will take a hard stance and hard problems for the global south. And then we're also building B2B services and SaaS companies between the India-US corridor. So as a fund and a studio, those are the areas we're interested in and building in.
Right. So what are some books or podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners, someone who wants to understand how healthcare works or so on?
To understand how healthcare works, as a whole bunch, but I think for founders, I've been reading this book again, The Hard Things About Hard Things.
Oh. Most recommended book on the podcast by far.
Yeah. It's every time I read it, I'm like, I wish I remembered this. And this is what I felt yesterday.
Yeah.
I think Getting to Yes is my favorite negotiation book. It's helpful. And look, there's a bunch of high quality podcasts like yours that has enabled founders to be courageous and a lot of people to take the leap towards entrepreneurship. That is exciting. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you so much again for being on the podcast. Yeah, it's certainly fascinating. A lot of different things that we didn't previously understand. And all the best for everything that you have coming up.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, that's it, folks. I'll see you guys on another episode. Like, share, subscribe, all of the good stuff. You know what. I'll see you soon.